Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Easter Pod. I'm your host, Corey Easterday, and on this episode, we are chatting with the one and only William McNeely. William, as you'll hear, is the founder and CEO of Do Greater Charlotte, an incredible nonprofit here in Charlotte that is doing truly inspirational, life-changing work in the lives of so many folks in our community. I won't spoil it. William and I had an incredible deep dive into all the work of Do Greater, and not just the work of Do Greater, but the vision behind it. We get into a lot of the why, William's and his team's heart and passion for the people they're serving, and some of the impact it's had in the greater Charlotte community and beyond. William is someone I've met here and there, like our paths have crossed a lot throughout the years in Charlotte, and I've just always been so inspired by his personal story, as we'll get into, the work they're doing through Do Greater. If you listened to the show before and kind of know some of my story and background personally and in the nonprofit world, you'll catch on really quick why so much of what he does resonates with me on a personal level. But it was truly an honor to have him on the show, get to hear his story, get to dive into the work of Do Greater. And as always, the Easter Pod, for your first-time listener, is striving to bring you stories of rad humans that inspire you to engage the world with creativity and hope. William McNeely, absolutely one of those people. And also be sure to check out this is episode 41, which is exciting. Be sure to check out episode 40, big milestone for the show, the previous episode with my good friend and fellow comedian, Carol Tyner. She was the featured guest, and Carol and I covered such a wide range of topics. That was a super fun conversation. So check out my conversation with Carol, dive into this episode with William, and learn all about the awesome, inspiring work he's doing. And if you like the show, you want to follow along, stay tuned for all the incredible guests we have coming throughout the rest of this year. You can follow us at the Easter Pod everywhere on social media. You can follow me personally at the Easter Dude on all social platforms. Subscribe on your podcast platform of choice so you don't miss an episode. Share with your friends, leave a rating, all that good stuff really helps out. And special thanks to Easterday Creative for joining forces with the Easter Pod to bring you these stories of rad humans, and to my friends at Token for helping to produce this episode. Follow William W. McNeely Jr. on Instagram. Follow at Do Greater. Check out dogreater.org. They just, at the time of this release, recently underwent a rebrand. Sparkhouses. I believe it's Sparkhouse Coffee, Sparkhouse Creative Lab, Sparkhouse CLT on Instagram. Dogreater.org has everything. At Do Greater. Check it all out. Follow their work. Get connected. William gives all the plugs at the end as well. And check out the show notes. Everything, if I'm screwing any of this up in this recorded intro, everything's going to be correct in the show notes. So be sure to check that out for ways to follow along, get connected with their work. And that's especially important in this case because I can empathize as a fellow nonprofit entrepreneur. You got to raise money. You got to get volunteers, all that stuff. So please be sure to connect. There's a myriad of ways to get involved with the important life-changing work William and Do Greater and the entire team are doing. And listen, I could gush over William and Do Greater for the next 5 minutes, but let's cut it. Let's get to the conversation. So without further ado, my conversation with William McNeely. Well, I am very, very excited to introduce today's guest on the Easter Pod. I think I first heard his story about 4 years ago now, maybe a little longer. And not only was I incredibly inspired then when I first heard his story and the work he's doing that we'll get into, but just following along from afar, had a few interactions over the years in person, gotten to go on tours, check out the space, things like that. I've just always been consistently inspired by the work he and his team are doing to, as he and the organization so wonderfully describes, They're empowering the next generation of creators, innovators, and entrepreneurs. He's the founder and CEO of Do Greater Charlotte, which includes the Do Greater Creative Labs. He's a speaker, builder, survivor, so much more. William McNeely, welcome to the Easter Pod. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, of course. I forgot to ask. Do we do the junior? Do we leave the junior?
You know, if you're my immediate family, you do. But if not, it's no.
Okay. Good. Then I was on the right track.
He was on the right track. Yes.
So I know. So we're actually sitting in the Huga podcast studio recording right now, and it's pertinent to our conversation because that's how we first got connected. Yeah. We were both co-working members of Huga, and I don't remember the occasion. There was a meeting. There was something. I remember Enderley was there. There was coffee, whatever. And I just remember hearing you. I think it was probably a 0 day, one
Could
of the
be, yes.
early ones where we just gathered around a table. And I heard you share your story, and I think you were you had the mobile lab. You were just about to open the Do Greater Creative Lab West at that time. And I don't know if we ever really, even to this day, fully got into it, but where I come from in Canton, Ohio, there were several, like this was my world. So I grew up, I'll just give you the 30-second version. I grew up in a very tough family background, poverty situation. Family didn't have a place to live for a brief period of time. I was in all the soup kitchens. I like everything, like youth group, all these things growing up that you kind of offer the community now. My family needed to avail ourselves of just to like survive, figure things out, develop, grow, all that kind of stuff. And it was leaders like yourself that came alongside me at a very pivotal age and point in my life that saw the potential I had, or just were willing to like show me grace and love me where I was at and help guide me through my situation that I'm even sitting here today. And so when I went to college at Malone University in Canton, Ohio, I became involved in like urban young life. I was at Lighthouse Ministries. I did youth group internships. I did all kinds of stuff. Long story short, junior year of college, got connected with the nonprofit I'm still with today, Current Initiatives. We do the laundry project, affordable Christmas, all that kind of stuff. That's meant to like meet the tangible need, but do it in a dignifying and empowering way. So even as early as like right out of college, 2012, I was hopping on a train to places like Mission St. Louis. My friend Josh Wilson has a nonprofit out there that does a lot of the similar development work, just to paint broad strokes that you're kind of doing here in Charlotte. And I was an employee at Starbucks, putting on the board. My favorite book was things like Toxic Charity. I was attending Christian Community Development Association meetings. So like all these things have been in my blood for a long time. To give you the context of why I admire and appreciate your work so much. And with that said, let me lay out for a second. Done a lot of hype. Can you just kind of give us the basic of what Do Greater is and, kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, again, thanks for having me today. It's always exciting that I get a chance to talk about Do Greater and what we do in the community here in Charlotte. But and I appreciate you, really seeing and understanding the process, particularly from many years ago when I walked through the door of Huga here as a single person trying to start this huge, I thought, impactful organization in the community, but didn't really have a great understanding of how that would happen at that particular time. And so, seeing, or knowing that people were literally saying, hey, I see that guy over there doing that. In my mind, it was like, how in the world I'm going to do all this stuff? And most people would say, hey, you're doing great things. But for me, it was like, oh, my God, how am I going to do this? And so to see where we are today is exciting, that we have built an organization really over the last 4 or 5 years that really makes tremendous impact in the city of Charlotte. And our focus and vision has always been is how do we create these opportunities for access and exposure to youth and young adults in our communities who might not have otherwise access to these opportunities. And so we really started to look at, very, quickly, 3 really things. I mean, does a student or does a community have access, particularly around what we were focused on was creative technologies? Is there technologies in that community so that our kids have access to tools so that they could, utilize those tools for good? That was the first thing. Second thing was, where are the cool spaces that they hang out in? What is it that they, where is it that they can say, hey, we've got a cool third place for us to go to? And the last thing really was around building these nurturing communities of support for our youth and our communities that they could see, here's a person that I can look up to and that I myself can aspire to become, something that person represents. We wanted those spaces. And so when we started to think about that in, early 2020, during COVID in 2021, we really started to figure out, okay, where is it that we could provide that impact? And, most of people, if I go back to my origins, being a native Charlottean and growing up on the west side of Charlotte myself, these are the types of things that I needed as a young adult, as a young kid, I should say. When my family, poor family on the west side of Charlotte, my mom, single parent, 4 kids, looking at, for me, what is it that I could aspire to become? And I didn't see a lot of that in my own community. I didn't see, a lot of college graduates. I didn't see a lot of folks who were extremely successful in my communities. And so it was something that I was literally looking for. It's like, who is it and where is it that I can, really start to develop my appetite for creativity? And that's, as, a lot of folks know, I was bused into south side of Charlotte, into a school that I really didn't even know existed, and started to see different things. And when I started to see that, my mind started to open up. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, is that what I can do? And I just, as a family, I say I and my siblings all just started to just eat it up, and saw the opportunities that were there for us, particularly in a growing city like Charlotte. So those are the things that Do Greater does today, is that how can we provide those same type of opportunities? We call them creative collisions. How many collisions can we create in our spaces that starts the path toward mobility? And that's quite simply what we do. We create those opportunities, and we can do it in spaces. We can do it in our mobile labs. We can do it wherever we activate. But the core value of what we do is, can we start that spark? Can we start that journey toward mobility?
All right, mic drop. Podcast over. That was it. Thanks for. No, I'm kidding. That was great to hear you. Like I said, I've followed the story. I've seen you speak, things like that. But it's great to hear you put it in that way, and so beautifully expressed, honestly. And I love the focus on creative spaces. So one of the big things of Starbucks and coffee shops, and that you have coffee shops in the spaces that we'll talk about, is they called it like a third space. So you have work, you have home, and then where do you go to hang out, connect with people? You're using third spaces not just as third spaces, but building in all these other functions to them of here's where you create, here's a cool place to hang out, here's where you get connected with other community members, and the exposure to things like you said for yourself. And I can relate in many aspects of my own story growing up that you would have never had exposure to otherwise. And it's twofold. It's like meeting those adults and seeing those people that have those skills and being in those cool spaces. Like that was a youth group for me growing up, but it expresses itself in all kinds of ways for people. Like you see, oh, this is possible. I remember I was in a youth ministry class one time, and my professor said, like, you are the vehicle through which your students can achieve their dreams and stuff like that. So it's so powerful to recognize that, to bring, and I see it all the time. You always have like the best, like some of the best leaders, creatives, entrepreneurs, all these folks in Charlotte coming around, being that inspiration. But then you personalize it and you give students and kids and folks that you're working with the opportunity to like apply it and train and do it, and not just say, oh, here's what's possible, but then like put it into action. That's huge.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think when you start to look at spaces, it was extremely important for us to create spaces that attracted young adults and youth into a cool environment. I mean, I think that's what we all strive for. When you talk about third places, I mean, I don't think we look for places that are comfortable for us, that are accepting of us, what our kids call, they got this cool vibe. We know what that vibe is for us. But when you start to look at the students that we work with and the young people that we work with, they don't have those opportunities. So, when you look at the history of Do Greater, we were coming out of COVID. So we started our organization right before COVID, and then was affected by COVID. And one of the things that we saw is that when you send a group of, students home to learn, and you say, hey, you can't go to school, you're going to have to go home to learn. And you go home into an environment that's not conducive for learning. So my son at the time was at Campbell University, and they closed down and sent him home. And he said, Dad, I've got to spend my next semester here at home. So for me, it was easy, to isolate the bonus room, turn it into a classroom, give him a large screen TV, some technology, and say, okay, close the door and go in there and learn. But I created this environment for him. So the youth that we work with coming out of COVID did not have that opportunity. If that was me when I was growing up with 3 boys in one room that all played a musical instrument, okay, and you told me to go home and learn, we weren't learning, okay? So that would be very difficult for us. And so coming out of COVID, we started to look at that. We're like, wait a minute, how do we create these spaces that these youth and these kids don't have in their own houses and create this third place opportunity? And so we started looking for spaces to do that. And we located a church on the west side that had, available space on the first floor. But I think the critical piece that people miss around that, because they come in our spaces and say it's cool, what they miss is the intentionality around designing that space. So we studied Stanford, I believe, one of the folks out of the D school there talked about, when you put creative people in creative spaces, they do extraordinary things. And so when we saw that, we were like, okay, cool. That means we have to create a space that people can do extraordinary things. Does that cost more? Absolutely. But it costs more to build, a Starbucks in Uptown Charlotte to create this atmosphere as well. Or it costs a lot to create this same type of atmosphere that you have as a corporate employee that walks into a large corporate bank and you say, this is cool for me to work in. We have to think about it the same way. So when we built the facility, we said, let's hire an architect. Let's hire a design firm because in our minds, we're going to design a space that is the third place for our kids in our communities. And so what happens is, we did it and they are coming. But you're starting to see a lot of that now. You see, Capital One building Capital One cafes. You see Ralph Lauren building coffee shops. I mean, this is the same thing that we did around how do you create a community in a space that attracts the audience that you want to attract into that space and keep them there and allow them to learn and for retail to buy more, So, I think quite frankly, I think we might have been ahead of the curve on that.
I think you are because what you're saying it explains so much for me why I resonate so much with your mission and have wanted to just like yearn to all right, how can I get more involved with this, support it, et cetera, over the years? Because it's, I don't hear a lot of 100% what you said about the corporate. They totally are getting that now. And I think you're definitely ahead of the curve on that for a lot of what corporate and businesses are doing with these spaces and how they're conceptualizing it. I don't know that I ever really hear nonprofit leaders describe it in the way you're describing it, which always, I've never maybe verbalized it like that, but it always seemed like internally kind of a huge miss to me of just thinking it's easy to get so caught up, and rightfully so in many cases, of what's the necessity? Is it food? Is it clothing? Is it housing? All these things. These are all basic, tangible need necessities that so many nonprofits are trying to meet and offer, including what we do with the Laundry Project and all that. So I think you need spaces for that. You need emphasis on that. It's all completely needed and valid. I can't remember if I mentioned this on air or off, but just me having to grow up, not my mom being a single working mom, not being able to put food on the table sometimes of no fault of her own, and having to go to food pantries and things like that. So you need those, but space and atmosphere and vibes and is this dignifying for people? Is it empowering? Is it a fun place to hang out? Is it a fun place to be? That's always how we've tried to think of it from just what we do with a laundry project standpoint. Because to me, there's nothing special about. Well, I shouldn't say it. It is special and helpful to have clean laundry, but there's lots of different organizations doing kind of a similar thing. So how do you differentiate yourself?
Yes. How
do people feel when they're there? How do people feel like they're part of the community? Is it mutual? We're learning from each other. We're sharing.
Yep.
We're growing together. I'm proud. One of the things I'm proud of the Laundry Project is we've had lots of people over the years that we're helping you do laundry, and then they come back as volunteers and stuff. Yep. So creating that reciprocity and connection. So all that to say, I think it's incredible to hear you talk about it in terms of space and atmosphere and investing in that with intentionality. Because I don't think there's enough nonprofits doing that, frankly, that understand that is a priority and makes such a huge difference. Because like you said, I didn't have the greatest home life growing up at times. And I've worked with lots of students over the years that home is not a space that's conducive to growth. So that being said, break it down for me. The mobile lab, the creative lab West, and you're about to open officially in a couple months the Creative Lab Uptown. Can you break down each of those for me and how they function to meet this mission, but like how they're unique?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that what you just said, particularly around why we do what we do. And I can see, and this will go into breaking down the actual model that we have, but I think what you talk about is the why of what we do. So for you, I look at the laundry project. I look at, yes, you're doing a great job cleaning, having your laundry services and clean clothes and things like that. But what you're selling and what your why is dignity. It is that you are providing dignity to folks who need that service. And so I think for us, when we start to dig deep into why we do what we do, we're all about economic connections. So we can have cool spaces all over the place. But if we don't connect that student from the west side or east side or north, wherever they come from, to a professional that can make that spark for them and start that pathway, then we failed. So when you talk about the spaces that we have, our spaces have scaled because our connections are scaling. So we're meeting the needs of more people, so we need more opportunities to connect. So that's why people would say, "Oh, you're just building." No, we're not just building new spaces. We're building more connection points. Excuse me. And so when we first started, the only thing I could afford was a truck. So I couldn't afford spaces. And so when we started to look at that first iteration, but yes, I could only afford a truck, but it was also serving a very specific problem, and that was that students had a challenge with transportation. So if I was going to create these connections and they could not get to where I needed them to be, then I needed to go to them. And so I had this epiphany when I was sitting literally in the Apple store one day, and I said, what if we were to take this type of training and this type of technology into communities? And quite frankly, I walked out of there, got a truck and filled it with iPads and technology and wireless broadband, and we started taking that out in the communities. That was our first interaction of saying, we can take economic connections to you in communities. We can pull up in your cul-de-sac, toot the horn, and you can come out and get this type of experiences. So that was the first thing. And so when COVID hit and we couldn't put people back into the back of a truck, how do we scale that? And first, what did we learn from that? Those are the three things: tools and technology, spaces, and community that we learned that the kids really wanted. Then how can we activate that in physical spaces? And that's when we went to the Creative Lab West. And we said, hey, 28208 zip code is one of the largest or highest, or has one of the highest unemployment rates in Charlotte. So how do we activate in that area to provide the types of creative technologies and trainings that we think needs to be, in this area? And that's when we found the space, and we worked with Gresham Smith architecture firm to turn that space into the Creative Lab West. And so from then, I think we might have served about 300 to 400 youth that first year, and now we're up to 1,200 that we're serving per year in that space in the church. It's in the bottom of a church. But not only that, we also saw that because we were activating that space and serving youth, and it had become this third place for them, we started attracting a lot of entrepreneurial adults in the space as well, because it's in low cost creative space that you can activate out of. It's kind of cool as well. And they became attracted to the space. So that first year, we had 4,500 adults in that space. And we continue to grow that every single day. So if you focus on that core value, that creative collisions, we call it, then it starts to scale. And when we talk about what we're doing uptown, we started to think about, okay, it's two things that we learned in our existing space. One is there's an appetite to support entrepreneurs, whether they are sixth graders or 35-year-olds. I mean, there is definitely, an appetite to train and teach around the entrepreneurial mindset. And then there's definitely a 32-year-old who is coming out of the corporate and starting their new gig and needs support. And that's what we were doing in our spaces. If you bring those two challenges and problems together, you say, okay, we need a space somewhere else to be able to support that. And then you look at uptown and you say, wait a minute, we're the second largest financial, community in the country. Why is it not that our students and young adults in our communities are not experiencing the uptown ecosystem, what we call the economic engine of Charlotte? And we just said to ourselves, what if it was us who actually provided that type of space in uptown to connect our corridors of opportunity in Charlotte to the Uptown ecosystem. I mean, we're uniquely positioned to do that. And so a couple of years ago, we started, I tell a story. I literally was walking uptown and saw a building there. And I was like, man, that's a cool building. It's 20,000 square feet. Now, we're small. We're still a small organization. And so, people really looked at me kind of crazy when I said, that I think is the next creative lab. And we positioned that with our partners and entered a competition in Uptown for reimagining vintage office buildings. And, a small 4-person nonprofit won second place in, multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar organizations. And so when we got that validation, we said that this is something that we need to do. And 2 years ago, we started on the process of designing, understanding what this model would look like, gaining, garnering support. And now this year at the end of May, middle May, we will launch the new Creative Lab Uptown. It will be a 20,000 square foot entrepreneurial hub. We call it a creative opportunity hub that will exist in Uptown Charlotte. And it will be the center of this, what we call our ecosystem of opportunity, bringing in community members, sponsors, and partners and entrepreneurs to create this environment for a 16, 17-year-old young adult to walk into a space and to develop, not only to develop skills, but to develop an idea that moves to income. And the entire organizational structure is all built around that.
I love that, and I love the intentionality behind all the language you use, like creative collisions, like everything. I think language matters a lot, and especially when you're trying to help kind of shape a vision and a culture and steer the ship as long as it can take to steer over many, many years of this is what underserved and under-resourced communities look like now, and this is how we kind of help try to move the ball forward and bring these skills. And I think language is huge to that, and I love the emphasis on support systems too, because I can't remember what the book was called, Pathways Out of Poverty, something like that. Mm-hmm. I might have the title wrong, but I remember as part of my training working at Lighthouse Ministries, we read a book like that, and my main takeaway was said in the book, like the two key, and this was true to my own experience, and I'm working with the youth in the neighborhood in Canton where I was. There's obviously so many socioeconomic factors that bake into all these things, and the support system and education were the two big things it focused on, and lack thereof. So obviously education, it's cyclical. You get truancies, tough home life, you're not getting the education you need, et cetera. But then also support system, like you lack knowledge of who do we go to when we need help with finances, when we need whatever, all these types of things. So you counting the adults, counting the students, creating the intentionality of bringing together, bridging those socioeconomic, all those communal, racial, all these kinds of divides that exist just in like human society, putting people in the same room and saying, how do we bridge those gaps and come together? And I learn from you, you learn from me, like creating that reciprocity, I think is huge and very transformative, because there was two organizations come to mind. One, I don't know if it's still in operation, but it was called Open Table, and their whole model. And, every organization has its like pros and cons and things like that. So not to get into that part, but just I resonated with their idea of, we have someone we want to help. So the whole idea of Open Table was, how do we surround them with like 8 advocates or people that specialize in legal services, finances, whatever, surround them with the support system. So I think on its merits, that's a phenomenal idea of that's what folks need. But then my friend Joel Daniel Harris in Canton, Ohio, runs an organization called Tom Todd that we went to the same church that he kind of started around the same time I started doing the laundry project. They work with middle schoolers around this idea of middle schoolers can innovate, have ideas. There's all, very underestimated part of the population is kids and youth, and how do you facilitate, getting their ideas in front of the people that can help make impact. So what you're doing in that regard of making those connections of we're working with these youth, we're working with all these kids, they right now have leadership potential. The whole name of Tom Todd was tomorrow, today.
Yes.
It's not just you're the future, you're today. And you're doing that, I see in a lot of ways with Do Greater, of all the kids you're working with, like this is now. You're it's not some future thing. Like you can be this kind of person now when you have these opportunities and access to people in the economic engine of Uptown. And I think, again, it's been a long day. I apologize. I can't remember if we were talking about offline or on the podcast, but just to reiterate that so many kids don't even make it out of their, square block radius of school, parents' work, whatever, just so the idea of going uptown, we can take for granted as adults.
Yes.
But that's huge for the kids you're working with.
Yeah. I mean, great point. I mean, I think one of the things that we say is all the time is potential is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And so when you start to look at how we take the potential out of our communities and allow them to see the possibilities and opportunities in other areas, I mean, it's about building this, we take for granted a lot of times the social capital that we have and how we have managed and navigated to gain that social capital. I mean, particularly working in corporate, I mean, you always think, okay, how do I, what's my next job? Who do I need to meet? And we're networking and we're going out. Well, how do you start that process earlier when you don't have the opportunity to create social capital in your own neighborhoods? So I think one of the things that research talks about is this whole idea, and Charlotte has done a great job understanding this, is that the studies that have come about over the last 20 years talks about these cross-class connections. When is it that these connections start to happen and then allow a person to see what their future looks like? I mean, I think all of us can go back to a time where we were like, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but then I had a teacher, or I didn't know, or I had a coach, or I had someone to come into my life to show me that I had some potential. Well, if you could intentionally create those opportunities for those connections to happen, as the Harvard studies talks about these cross-class connections, for me it happened because I was busty on the other side of a city. And so, yes, there were cross-class connections. There were folks within my, in my school and became my friends who I saw in a different light and saw, oh, wait a minute, I can do that. I can compete in that area. And I got the confidence to be able to do that. Well, if we can create those opportunities now in our spaces, then we can show a 6th or 7th grader that here's an architect, that is willing to come in and work with you and show you what it takes to be an architect. Well, 6th, 7th grade, I didn't know what an architect was. I tell a story about Little Architecture all the time. I used to walk up Tyvola, and Little Architecture had a space there, had their office there, and I was like, what happens in there? Now we work with Little Architecture. And so I think those are the types of things that we believe that are important for us to do. We work with most of the, a lot of corporations in Uptown, and particularly I'll mention one that we have a great relationship with, and that's Truist. And we've had an innovation design-a-thon program that we've worked with Truist over the last 3 years. And we've had students from our communities who have been on the 14th and 15th floor at Truist doing these extravagant innovation and immersion programs at Truist, working with their journey mappers, journey experience designers and things as well. And we've had students go up there to their top floor and say, man, I've never been in one of the corporate towers, and I've had a dream that one day I would be here. And he's looking out over the city, and we're like, well, you're here, 47th floor. Take a look at it. And, but the tears well up, and it's like, well, okay, wait a minute. We take this for granted every single day. And so we think that, particularly, as an organization that can create a space uptown and can connect that back to our communities, we just think it's extremely important with how Charlotte is growing, how we believe our students need to be activated and they need to be involved in the growth of a city that's growing at 157 people per day. They don't have any idea that we're growing that rapidly. But if we can include them in that process and show them that here are the things that are happening in our city and you can be a part of that, then I think that's what our mission is all about.
Yeah, and I love that too, because I think there's a trap you can fall into from a compassion standpoint. One of my favorite books, Toxic Charity, written by Bob Lupton, will talk a lot about this, of like, you can fall into this trap of, I am here to help you. I am the savior. I am, whatever, that kind of mentality, as opposed to recognizing the mutuality of like, we're all human, we're all part of the society, the city, this neighborhood, whatever. Collectively, how do we solve these bigger issues? Yep. And I think what the design-a-thon you mentioned, I saw that friends, mutual friends that have been on this podcast as well, Emmanuel and Adrian, 3 Hope Vibes, were part of that, and along with other organizations. But just how do we fix the issues around homelessness? And I think you're doing it in that way of like, it's not just we're trying as a nonprofit, as Do Greater or whatever, to solve an issue. We're showing and working together, like we can be all together part of solving these bigger issues. Not just like we're going to help you and do that. We can work on something together, like that affects all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that can be powerful because for me growing up, it was realizing like, yes, I have crazy family and life circumstances that I need help in, but where it really clicked for me was realizing, I have power to do something about that to help other people.
Yeah.
And so even that design-a-thon, I think, was an incredible thing. Like, how do we do this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, things like that come out of this idea around, specificity. And people will ask us, what is it that you guys do? Are you STEM? Are you creativity? Are you design? Are you design thinking? And, and I would say we do all of those because one of the things that we want to do is we want to help our kids solve very complex problems. And so we start with the problem. And you look at our design-a-thons. Our design-a-thons are all based around how can we bring a group of kids together and connect them with professionals to solve a very complex problem. Because we believe that if we can teach a kid through high school how to think critically and solve problems and, rationalize, these things are skills that they can carry on, particularly with the entrepreneurial mindset as well, that will take them far down the road. And so we are focusing on that problem solving and critical thinking skill sets in everything we do. And that, I think, brings, a lot of different organizations and people together to solve a common problem. So starting with a problem like, the unhoused that we, building a space uptown displaced as we started the construction, we felt it was our an opportunity for us to say, okay, how do we deal with that problem? And how do we take some kids out of our communities and help and allow them to work in conjunction with us to help try to come up with some solutions?
I think there's 100%. And I think there's this idea I've learned over time, like just it takes a village aspect of these complex issues absolutely. That I fully understand what we're doing with the laundry project. It's not going to solve all these. It's like we're doing what we can. I know I can do this one thing really well, but that's why in our example, we're always trying to bring other organizations and partners to projects to try to share resources and do, you try to, again, it's how you design it. It's how you bake these things in that are truly empowering and promote dignity and hope and all these things. You guys are obviously built on that. That is what you do, to the T of we're creating these resources and stuff. But I think that's the only way complex issue they're created complexly. It takes all of us to create them, it's going to take all of us to kind of solve it. So I love you're making those connections and having that innovative thinking. You're sharing people say, what do you do? And it's well, all the above, because that's what it takes to move the ball forward in a meaningful way. Talk to me about, I think it just underwent a rebranding, the Sparkhouse Coffee.
Yes.
Right? That's the coffee shops that are in what role does that kind of play in the mission?
Yes, you've been researching a lot here.
Yeah, I told you, I was late to a meeting this morning. I was up late last night doing it.
Yeah. By the time this podcast comes out, we probably would have rebranded a couple of things with our organization. And that is that, when we look at what we do, we love what we do. Do Greater is a tremendous missional organization that really is focused on doing greater things to impact the lives of others. And when you start to look at the overarching goals of what we do, it is a biblical, faith-based organization that stems from me, my upbringing, my challenges, my obstacles, and how I see myself overcoming some of those things. So when I say do greater, we're talking about doing greater things to impact the lives of others. And so that's our overarching goal. So everything that we do, it has to have some type of impact on individuals. I believe I am not necessarily here just for myself. I'm here to impact others' lives. And so I've committed myself, after my, huge health crisis I had many years ago, 7 years ago now, around, a double lung transplant. And so for me, it was, okay, what is it am I here to do? And how do I very quickly start? I don't care what it is, whatever obstacles you're going to throw at me, whatever excuses you're going to throw at me, I am going to start doing it. And so that's Do Greater. That's Do Greater's ethos. That's what we do. It is a motivation. It's it's Do Greater Charlotte. Are you going to do Greater Charlotte or do Greater Charlotte? So you can take it a variety of different ways. For me, it is, I am here to do greater things that will impact communities, lives, and see 20, 30 years down the road that someone in our ecosystem, someone has been involved in our organization, is now making an impact in our city. But we do have physical spaces, and those physical spaces are, our creative labs that are building and growing all around the city. But one of the things as we are launching the Creative Lab Uptown, we said, we are outgrowing that name. It is somewhat Creative Lab. Yes, that's what we do. A ton of stuff. We do entrepreneurship. We do AI innovation. We do creative trades. We do a lot of different things, particularly in our spaces. And our spaces are growing as, again, entrepreneurial hubs of support in our city. And so we thought we had outgrown that name. And so now we will be launching, particularly as we launch our Uptown space, we'll be calling our spaces Sparkhouses. And Sparkhouse for us is a creative opportunity hub. These are spaces in our community that are the third place for the folks who are activating in those communities. Yes, do we have creative collisions and sparks and things like that? Yes, we do. But we think it's more about this home and this house and this space that are activating in our communities, that are people who are inside say, this is the place I want to be. This is the vibe I love, and these are the connections that I want to make that will not only take me up the economic mobility ladder as a young high schooler or a college student or a young entrepreneur, but it's also the place for me as a professional in our communities to make those connections to help. So we believe now as we move forward, as we continue to scale our model from the west side to historic West End, to the east side, to Albemarle Road, to South Boulevard, opening up our hub in Uptown. We think that is a better representation of what we're doing. So we're excited about it, man. Sparkhouse merch is being designed right now. And ironically, I give a shout out to Matt Stevens. Matt Stevens is a huge brand identity expert here in Charlotte, did all the Night Swim coffee stuff. He designed our new brand for our Sparkhouse. And so that is probably something that nobody knows. Because I see you looking, I've never told anybody that yet.
No, I'm glad to get the exclusive. I
got the exclusive. I don't think I've told anybody that yet because we haven't made the announcement around. Matt and I worked all over Christmas to redesign and redevelop this. So I think you'll like it. I think it will really encompass who we are and what we are, what we're all about.
Wow! Just when I think you can't get any more impressive, you're dropping names like Matt Stevens. I'm pretty sure if it's the same person I'm thinking of, that he worked with one of my favorite authors, Shea Serrano, on one of his projects recently.
He's done a ton of work. Yes,
that's incredible. Wow. Okay. No, I love that. I love the concept of Sparkhouse. I love the intentionality, the language, the vision behind all of it. What I appreciate about you too, just on a personal level, is you are and I want to dig into it a little more. You've been through a lot personally, but the vision that's come out of it for you and your intentionality with that vision, it's not haphazard. Everything's thought out. Everything's purposeful. I think that's very meaningful. And I actually just learned this last night in my research. I didn't know, but just the name of Do Greater coming from a Bible verse. I mean, I majored in youth ministry in college, and that working, being in churches growing up is where I discovered my own kind of potential and leadership capabilities. First place I ever spoke publicly was in my youth group, things of that nature. And for me, the Laundry Project, I didn't start it I started in Ohio, but I didn't start the organization. But our founder and CEO, myself, same page of it is very faith-based in that regard of, when I finally experienced hope in my life and the ability to move forward and just the ideas around ministry of reconciliation and if you are faith-based, and the way I always looked at it is if I truly believe that, Jesus is Lord of all, then he's already doing things in all these communities, and it's just my job to join on mission with what God's already doing, not start from scratch or do it myself or recreate it, but just to help unlock the potential and the dignity that everyone's already imbued with. Yeah. I think all those things are very key to that. I just love that it even came from a Bible verse. That was I think it's incredible. But your personal story, I mean, you mentioned it. You had the double lung transplant. You were named the 2025 Charlatan of the Year, Charlotte Magazine. They did pretty in depth on your story, but just to the extent you're going to get into that. I know you worked at Apple. You had these health issues, but how that ties into how this organization exists.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't go through a challenge like that I did 7 years ago without having it tremendously affect you and what the rest of your life looks like, because you start to think about, okay, why is it that I'm given a second chance? I mean, for me, I think I was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis back in 2015, 2016, and so I'm just a normal guy, doing stuff in the community, coaching my son's football team, and having a great life. Wife, kids, all going well, and was diagnosed with that at that point. So that was a huge life changing time that I had to really start to understand for myself who I am, what I'm here for, and how I going to take the next steps after that news. Because when somebody tells you that, and one, you have a hard time processing it, because I didn't have a lot of physical, at that particular time when they told me, I didn't have a lot of physical limitations. But they said, you've got this, this debilitating, this, disease that is in your body, and it's continuing to progress. And so, I said, okay, cool. But in, March 2016, I woke up one morning and couldn't breathe. And so that was when I went into hospital that day, and came out of the hospital that day with oxygen tanks that I carried around for the next 3 years. And so that is a huge wake-up call. It's like, wait a minute, I am now disabled. I am literally walking around with 3 oxygen tanks, and the day before I wasn't. And so that really started, for me, it was, one, I had to, come to a realization that it had happened to me. And one of the first things I said was, most people would say, why is this happening to me? And I said, well, I mean, why not me? I mean, I'm nobody special. I'm just like everybody else. And I can read every single day what challenges and obstacles and people are going through these things. So why is it that I'm special that I wouldn't actually go through it? Now, was it unfortunate? Yes. I mean, but, it's like, okay, I've got it. I've got to figure out how to deal with it. And so for me, those 3 years, and I think one of the most important things that people have to understand about me is, and what was happening is, I did not realize, or I think I didn't internalize the fact that I was dying. Okay. I internalized that I was carrying oxygen, and in my mind, at some point, I felt I would come off the oxygen, even though I wasn't. But I think that perspective changed allowed me to start to think about, okay, if I do, what is it that I'm going to do with it? And so I started ideating around Do Greater. I mean, I was sick when I came up with the vision for the organization. So I think the lesson there is that when you are at your lowest is when the vision for the next stages of your life starts to happen, because you are being prepared to deal with that over the years. So I can go way back in my life and say, okay, I went through that challenge, but it was preparing me for this challenge. And so when it came, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I've dealt with this before. So let's figure this out. And so I continued to plan like I was healthy. I continued to do things. I would be on the football field coaching a game with 3 oxygen tanks behind me, because I felt like I should do exactly the same thing that I was doing before. What's different about me because I'm carrying oxygen tanks? And I think now I was treated differently because people saw me differently, with the tanks, but I felt I was the same. And I think as I continued to go through those years and my health got worse, and I walked into Duke Medical Center and they said, you need a lung transplant. And not only did they say that, they said, you have 2 weeks to live. And so for me at that point, it was, okay, I've prepared the last 3 years that I think that I understand and know what the next phases of my life should be. I can't get to that unless I have a transplant and successfully have a transplant. So I'm already thinking about, okay, what happens after the transplant? Not the transplant, but what's next? And the transplant was just a way for me to get to the things that I believe was the next phase of my life. Now, I had to go through it, and it was scary, and it was difficult, but it was this transition stage of, okay, here's what I've got to go through. It's almost like I've always heard, your success is on the other side of through. So I had to go through the storm to get to the other opportunity that I had on the other side, and I did. And so when I woke up from that transplant, breathing at 100%, my entire focus was how to implement and activate Do Greater Charlotte. And I think there was, no excuse, no no excuse, no, I can't do this. I'm rehabilitating. I've got a lung transplant. I need to wait 8, 10 months before I start this. No, I started probably the day I came out of the lung transplant and started trying to make it happen.
I mean, wow. Yeah, that's I knew you had the transplant, but I appreciate you sharing that because the story goes so much deeper, like just the journey of up to even having that transplant and then after it. And I think just resiliency in general is such an underrated like quality for anyone to have. And I think as you develop it more and more, it's this kind of thing. One of my friends, Craig Collin, I also do stand-up comedy among the 15 other things. He's a fellow comedian, but he's had cancer 6 times and beaten it. And there's a resiliency you develop to life that once you go through something like what you went through with the double lung transplant or cancer, doesn't have to just be health related, but you go through something really difficult, like you said, it prepares you. But then there's this kind of like, why not on the other side of it? If you're lucky enough to have that perspective shift, what's fundraising capital campaign for Creative Lab Uptown when you've been through facing your own mortality? That's nothing comparatively, but I think it's an underrated characteristic. I think it's incredible to see like what's on the other side of that. And one of the questions I wanted to ask off of that is, do you think Do Greater would exist if you hadn't gone through that?
Yeah, I think in some ways it would. I think Do Greater has always existed in some ways. I just don't think it's been activated the way it is today. I mean, I've always had this, one of the things that the transplant made me do was to kind of, and I think everybody should do this, but it made me think about my life. I mean, when you're sitting there and you're thinking about, somebody's telling you you've got 2 weeks to live, you start thinking about, okay, nothing else matters really. It's like, okay, what is it that I have done? Now, when I look back at my life, I think I've done a ton of stuff. I mean, I was extremely active in the community. I was on boards. I worked in nonprofits. I did a ton of stuff, but at that particular time, I didn't think I was like, well, if I'm not here in 2 weeks, none of that matters. I couldn't even realize, even though all the stuff that I thought I had done, I was like, okay, what does it mean? And so if I look at all of the things that I had done, I think Do Greater was actually being actualized during that entire process. I was learning, I was understanding, I was, figuring out what it was that I was supposed to do initially. And so I could see what I call the red thread that ran through everything that I did. And really I came up, I don't know, I was getting a little older, late 40s, and I said, well, what is my why? And I said, okay, I exist to help people, reach their full potential through leadership, vision, and focus so they can do greater things to impact the lives of others. So I was saying Do Greater before Do Greater was a thing. So it was there. And then I didn't say this before, but I was sitting one day as I was, sick, and I wrote a sentence down, and it says, commit to doing greater things that will keep giving when you are no longer able to give. And I didn't necessarily know what that meant. I was like, okay, what does that mean? But all of the pieces were starting to come together. And so after the transplant, it was, okay, I can go 10 years back and figure out, oh, that's why that happened. This is why this happened. And so when you are going through those things, I think you have to go back and look at, okay, what is it that I've been prepared to do? And how do I overcome these obstacles? Because I can see those things. I mean, a lot of times I think we let little things take us off the path. And I love to have this analogy of, I'm on this journey, and I got 2 boundaries on left and right. Now, I'm on this journey, and I'm still going forward, but I tell you, between those 2 boundaries, I'm all over the place, left and right and up and down. Most people don't even know. You talk about the transplant 7 years ago. Last year I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so I had to, yes, and it was the kind that, yes, I had to go through the process and get it removed and all that. And so I don't even talk about that much because I think, is it serious? Yes. And I talk about prostate cancer and your early detection and all those type of things that all of us need to be concerned about. But there was a bigger purpose for me that I was on this journey toward. That was a huge bump that I had to deal with, but I made a decision fairly quickly because it was, I saw the opportunity and the possibilities for me, and that the obstacle that came up, I was like, okay, that's just another one of those obstacles. Let's take care of it. Let's keep moving forward. And everything worked out. All went well. And now we're continuing on the path that I believe that I'm, given a second chance to do. So it's an interesting journey that we're on right now. I love it. I love the fact that I get a chance to every single day think about I'm fortunate enough to be able to create an organization that not only supports me, it supports other people, and that we are impacting the lives of the Charlotte community.
Man, I just the prostate cancer. Yeah, it's crazy, like what you've been through. But I love the way you're looking at it. I think we as humans, it's in our nature to think very self-focused, and what's our legacy going to be? Like everyone thinks about that, but to think of it from like a self-focused standpoint, how are people going to remember me? All that kind of stuff. I love the spin you're putting on it and maybe it's just because of, like you said, the things you've been through, or I love how you described feeling like all you've been through in your life kind of led you to this point. I definitely resonate with, you're always bouncing around in between like I always feel like I have my core values and I have like a general vision for my life and what fits into that. But at the same time, I feel like I'm doing the same thing, just always bouncing back and forth between that. But how it all prepared you for where you're at now, and to start something like Do Greater, that I just think is, obviously I'm just an outside observer, but just I think has in many ways achieved the vision that you had for it and that has been set forth in bearing that kind of long-term fruit. And to think of legacy more in that fashion of who, like, if you're quote unquote doing it right, I kind of hate saying it that way, but I think your legacy is that there's going to be a 6 degree of separation where somebody you've impacted through your work at Do Greater is going to go on and do greater things, to coin the phrase. And the people they impact will never even know you existed, possibly. But just to see how that fruit can kind of spread and bear itself out, I think that's the best any of us can hope for, because that does have like such a long-term lasting legacy, and then selfishly it does end up like being something that, but I love the idea that it's not, because I'm still very much in that, like I'm in my mid-30s trying to figure out a little bit of, all right, where's the next 20, 30 years going? We have our daughter. How am I going to impact her? Who am I bringing her around? You're thinking about all those big life questions. And I just love the like pushing the self-focus of it aside and continued emphasis on how is it like bearing fruit that's going to maybe not even get traced back to me.
Yeah.
But that has like a long-lasting impact. And just the impressive, I mean, I saw you studied mechanical engineering at NC State. You're a drum major. I'm a drummer. That's cool. Jazz musician. I love jazz. I wouldn't call myself a jazz musician. I read that fact while I was listening to Miles Davis last night, actually.
Cool. Love Miles.
So I was like, all right, my guy. So yeah, impressive, but all led to where you are now. And now I know why people call you coach. You're a DB coach. That's great. I've always seen William Coach McNeely. I didn't know that's the football connection. All right. Well, as we kind of wrap things up here, I did want to hit on a couple more things real quick. So what are the programs of Do Greater that you would want to highlight? Just like I saw there's DJing, there's like we talked about video podcasting, photography.
Yeah. No, we've got a lot of programs that we work with. I think most of our youth who will come into our programs really focused on a couple of things. One is it's all about, for us, entrepreneurship. I mean, we believe the entrepreneurial mindset can not only support you if you want to start a business, but also can help you in any endeavor that you move forward with as well. So we teach that mindset, through classes around, we call it Start Upward. And kids come into our spaces and they have an idea, or we help them to create an idea. And they walk through the same processes that a 32-year-old would walk through around starting a business. I mean, we use Lean Canvas, and they talk about their product market fit and customer acquisition cost, and it's same, Lean Canvas, business model canvas, all those type things that we're teaching 6th and 7th and 8th graders how to do. And so we know if they go through those same processes, they could be able to replicate that down the road. But then, we've got classes around, taking, learning design and then taking that design into a product. We have a camp going on right now. It's called a class going on right now called Make for Good. And students are actually in that, and they're developing their skill sets around branding and design and marketing and those things, digital marketing as well. And then they are applying those skills to support nonprofits in the community. So a nonprofit will come in, partner with a student group, and they will actually do physical work for that organization as well. So it's all about teaching kids to take an idea and move that idea to income. And so I think it's those things that I think are important for us. And so we do creative workforce skills where we teach youth how to be content developers through some of the programs that we have. We have a creative digital studio 18 weeks of programming where youth can come in and learn how to do photography and videography and learn all the skills associated with that as well. And we're launching multiple programs. Uptown will have a new screen printing academy where we have a full screen printing press that youth will, one, be learning the skills of being a screen printer, but also taking that into the entrepreneurial endeavors like apparel design and things like that. That not only can they design the apparel, they can manufacture it too and sell it. And then allowing them to utilize those same types of equipment and technologies for our partners who are out in the community who need those services as well. So you can take a 17-year-old out of a high school and teach him apparel design, allow him to screen print that. He can sell that product, online, but he also can do that for one of our, major partners who might need 100 T-shirts for a basketball game, and they will be paid to do that. So a lot of different programs that we offer, and we do special programs with some of our partners around game design, creative skill development, a lot of things in our spaces.
I love it, and I especially love. I resonate with a lot of that because I've dabbled in a lot of those things myself. DJing was the one I'm terrible at. I can say of all the things you mentioned that I've tried. That
you got a big adult DJ class. I
love it. Yeah. I love DJing in theory because I love music, but it's a whole skill to keep the vibe up. But no, I love that, and I love the apparel design aspect too because a lot of I have some friends I'm thinking of that I grew up with, where I came from in Barberton, Ohio. Mm-hmm. I grew up near the projects. Like a lot of some of my friends found their way out ultimately long term through like being designers and being quite successful at it. So I think all those are very great marketable skills, and they cover a lot of bases of learning how to start a business, learning digital side marketing. Yep. Just taking one thing like apparel design, there's 15 different skills in that that are encompassed, not just the screen printing.
Yes.
So I love that aspect of it. But the one thing I wanted to all those programs are phenomenal, very practical. I love the creative aspect of it, the practical aspect of it. And as I get into my final last few questions here, I also wanted to highlight another way that we've gotten connected, knowing each other, was through like Creative Mornings and Charlotte is Creative.
Yes.
You do a lot of Charlotte is Creative too, right?
Yeah, I love those guys. Tim and Matt have been great friends of mine for a number of years. They were right there at the beginning of the formulation of Do Greater. I tell a story all the time. I was one of the first grantees for them at the Boat of Inspiration as well. One of the first Boat of Inspirations and all of that. And a HUG grant that we received, $250 for a HUG grant that we received from them, purchased the first iPad for our mobile technology unit. So they became the really, I always say, $250 was what they gave me, and that's all I had to really start the technology in the truck, and we scale from there. So it's those little things that mean a lot. That shows that this is a real product, a real organization, a real a nonprofit that's going to make an impact, and everybody starts to see that validation. So yeah, I love those guys. We continue to work with them a lot.
I think that brings up something to highlight real quick of just the aspect of, like the phrase we use, do what you can, but what you guys are doing, can all the problems and things you're doing, like I look at the scope of what Do Greater is now and what issues you're trying to address and how you're trying to, like we've talked about, help move the ball forward for underserved, under-resourced youth communities. It can seem so big and overwhelming, but I think it's important to highlight, like anyone I've talked to that's like yourself or anything I've accomplished, or first of all, there's the community aspect to it. You don't do it in a vacuum. You got to partner with other people, like the Charlotte is Creative partnerships. And I think if I didn't, I meant to highlight that earlier, what you were talking about community support and partnerships. I think is so huge. The working together aspect of it, always way better together than we are separately. But also you started with that $250 HUG grant, the iPad, and see it snowball from there, those kinds of things. Obviously, it takes a lot of years and a lot of work, but I always think that's important to highlight for folks, that things can be big and overwhelming, but you can kind of start where you're at with what you have and take those next steps to ultimately grow. So what encouragement, you shared a lot of super encouraging and helpful things, but anything you haven't shared that you like to give as just general like encouragement or advice, maybe someone wanting to get more involved in nonprofit work or address some of these issues or passionate about the things you're talking about, or just I mean, you obviously have a lot of life wisdom to give to. So, I mean, anything.
No, I mean, I think it's, it's a lot of things that I think that are important. One of the things that you just mentioned around, that $250 iPad. I always say, it's just, one of the things I thought about at that time was to think big, focus small. And I had this huge, big vision of what we wanted to become. Because from day one, I always said we will have a space in every quarter of our opportunity. It's 6 quarters. And I've got, if I count my mobile labs, we're in 3 spaces because mobile can go anywhere. So we got a little way, we got a ways to go. But from day one, we said we would continue to grow. So I think that's big. We had this big vision, but we started, focusing small. And so those small wins started to build up over time. And so I think that's one of the things when you people sit back and say, I got this big vision, but where do I start? And I think you have to look back from my perspective is that the other thing I always say is that, I've got a ton of experience in technology, community, all of that. But when I came out of my transplant, I had nothing, 0. All the resources were gone. Financially, they were gone. Lung transplants are expensive, So I think when I look back at that, I think people need to understand that, there are times, I'm starting over, and I was 55 at the time I had a transplant. I'll be 62 on Saturday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So you can start over at any time. I mean, I think that's one of the things is that, hey, it's not too late to start over. And the second thing is that, big vision, small bites. I mean, take it off one day at a time. And I think the lesson for me was, I have this saying about start anyway. You might see some of that on my LinkedIn and all that. It's like, no matter what, start anyway. And that was the kind of attitude that I had. I was like, okay, who's going to tell me no? I mean, if you tell me no, okay, who cares? So I would just start and do things and just walk into a place and ask for something. And you'll be amazed at the type of people who want to help you if you paint that vision for them. And they can join that. You talked about, it's ironic you talk about that because I've done a ton of studies around Henry Blackaby and experiencing God a long time ago, old. And one of the things he talks about is that, you go where God is working. And for me, it is painting this vision around what is it that I am purposed to do at this point. And when I paint that vision, people will say, you know what? Yeah, I get it. I understand it. And it all goes back. I tell everybody, it's like you think that nobody's going to support you. But when you look at the billionaires that are out there and they go with ideas around, hey, I've got this cool idea that I want you to invest in. Most investors will say, I'm not investing in that business because that's going to change 4 or 5 times. And you see that over the years. I mean, Instagram when it started. It changes all the time. They're investing in in that person, and they say, that is the person that can make this happen. And so for me, I think that's what it was. I had this huge vision, but people would say, you know what? He is so passionate about this, and he understands this. He's going to make it happen. And that's where we got the investment. So I think, my advice to people is that, one, solve a real problem. I mean, the problem has to be solved, a real problem that needs a solution. But once that happens, you have to be passionate about it. You have to understand how to solve that problem, and people will invest in you to be able to do it. And that is from a person who started with 0, and we are now building a 20,000 square foot space uptown, and we still only have 5 people. So I think that is key there. The other part of it is one of our core values that we talk about. And this is that my staff tells me how crazy I am because it's called Chase Your Crazy. And one of our core values is, we have these crazy ideas in our heads all the time. And we say, that's crazy. Well, who defines it as being crazy? If you, again, start to focus on that, become passionate about it and start to chop that thing down, it's not a crazy idea. It happens. And so I think that is where, you activate these ideas that I think are inspired ideas that someone's saying, this is a problem, you should solve it. And you are the one to be able to do that. And when you realize that and you become what I call problem obsessed, then you're going to make it happen. And so I think that's the thing that I would leave people with is really, we talk about purpose. We talk about our why. A lot of folks are trying to find why they exist and what they're here to do. For me, it is understanding not only what you're passionate about, but if that passion moves you to action, that is where you're supposed to be. I'm passionate about tons of stuff, but some of it doesn't move me to anything. I try to do this, I try to do that. It doesn't stick, But the one thing that did stick for me was when I started to see a kid out of one of our communities who said, this is the place that I like to come to. This is the place that I'm learning. I'm meeting so many different people here. That's when I said, you know what? Yeah, that's where I need to be. And that's where I need to pour my energy into. And that will be, my legacy, as you mentioned. I mean, it might be 30, 40, 50 years down the road that I might ever see. But Do Greater is here to make an impact on the lives of others. I might not see that impact, but I know it's happening. So
I would affirm that, my friend. I think it is happening. I think it's happening every day in ways seen and unseen. I think the work you're doing is incredibly powerful. I love everything you shared there. In no order, the being passionate and the action part. Personally, I'm very passionate about football. I did not play. I could never coach. So that's probably not where my action is. Yes. But I love, I love the game. But for me, my own story, these nonprofit spaces, all these things, I affirm that. I love the worthy of investment. People have shown you, both in recent years with Do Greater and obviously throughout many points of your life, that you are worthy of investment. And so now you're turning that around and showing that to everyone you work with Do Greater. I think that's huge and something that doesn't always click for us, unfortunately, as people for lots of reasons in our lives, things we go through, environments we're in, like we've talked about, but also just the breaking down barriers, showing, again, full circle to what is possible, chasing your crazy. Why not? Saying why not, showing that for any person out there, your life has redemptive qualities to it, both within your own story, the things you've been through, you can find that redemption, but then you can be that for other people. Yeah. And you can chase your passions and dreams and all these things, and that why not? So I love that you shared all that. I appreciate it. I'm we're obviously going to put this out there and, appreciate you being on the pod and all that, but even if the mics are off, I would just be so grateful for this time from you to
no
learn from your wisdom, because I respect you so much. To me, even just having you in the studio is proof of chasing your crazy, chasing the dreams of ever since I heard your story, I'm like, man, I gotta get him on my podcast one day and just to have a chance to glean from your wisdom, everything you've been through, everything you're doing. A lot of respect, admiration, and appreciation for it. And for whatever it's worth, if I could just be another voice to affirm, it's having a huge impact. I'm really hoping that just from having you on the podcast and through connections I have, more folks will be able to learn about your work, learn about you guys' support. To that end, where can people follow you, follow Do Greater, and very pertinent to what you do for a living, how can people get connected, support in practical ways too?
Yeah, no, I think if you, we do a ton on social, so follow us at Do Greater, most platforms. You can find me, I think it's W. McNeely Jr. on Instagram. And dogreater.org as well. I do a ton of stuff on LinkedIn. So follow me there if you want my personal comments on LinkedIn of how I feel about things throughout the not only my organization but the community as well. So yeah, just connect with us all over social and our website, but also come out and see us at Do Greater. I mean, our creative labs, or as I should say now, our Sparkhouses. That we are building across the city. I think it's important that we build communities that folks want to come to, but also, you wanting to make a connection with our youth and young adults that are activating in our spaces to be able to not only mentor and volunteer, but to also just make an impact and an impression on a young person to say, just set an example and see what they can do or become. I love to have you in our spaces, and in both of our spaces, we will have a coffee shop too. So come hang out with us and drink some Enderley coffee that we sell. That Tony has trained us to do so well, and all of the anything that you invest in Do Greater goes directly to our youth. So whether that is buying a latte, or renting one of our cameras, or renting a room in our spaces, those dollars go back to support our programs, because all of our programs are 100% free. So we have no charge to our programs for our youth. And so it's important for me to be able to do that, because I see myself, as a young kid not being able to afford something like this as well. So we do 100% free. So it's my job to be able to support and raise all the fundraising to be able to do that. But if you come into our spaces and support, all those dollars go right directly to our programming.
Please make sure to follow and check out the work of William and Do Greater. We're going to have links in all the show notes. I know dogreater.org is the website as well, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So check that out. And, as one nonprofit, person to another, and I can just affirm to anyone listening within earshot, everything you said, 100%, the money, how it invests, where it goes, all that's really important. And I found too, just encouraging folks, like anyone listening to this, you have things, not just monetarily, but I always have people hitting me up, like, where can I volunteer? How can I get involved? You have skills, things that are just so valuable to the work you guys are doing at Do Greater. And as you've emphasized over and over, it takes a village, it takes the community, all of us coming together. So I love that tangible aspect of how folks can get involved as well. And I would just reaffirm, like, this is incredible what you're doing. I really hope folks get connected. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, personally, want to thank you so much for giving me your time.
No problem.
For coming on the show, and would like to reaffirm my commitment to however myself or Megan or anything we can do to get involved. I want to be about that Do Greater life. Personally, everything you said, the wisdom you shared, but also as you guys enter into this space in Uptown and keep going, just here for me, anything I or we can do to get involved and help out personally, it's going to be much more on my radar now of like, all right, where's opportunities to connect in here? But we're in from that standpoint, because I've been around a lot of leaders, done a lot of stuff in this space, and you definitely stand out to me as somebody that none of us are perfect. We all have things we're trying to improve and work on every day, especially within the mission of the organization. I understand, it's one thing to sit on a podcast, another you have the day-to-day grind.
Yes.
I totally get that. But I really would just lastly say you guys are having an impact in Charlotte, and I think it's going beyond that too, in ways that may take a while to understand. But I just can't affirm enough the actual life-changing work that you guys are doing, and I appreciate your time to share about it.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate all the kind words, and enjoyed the podcast.